Washington, D.C. was tense on that cold November morning in 2025. All eyes were on the Supreme Court, where 9 justices prepared to deliver a decision that would define the limits of presidential power. Months of economic turmoil and constitutional debate had led to this moment. The president's sweeping nationwide tariff had divided the country and thrown the economy into chaos. Protesters, journalists, and anxious citizens crowded the streets, waiting for history to unfold. The case, U.S. Chamber of Commerce versus United States, was about more than economics. It was about the core principles of American democracy. Who holds the power to tax? The president under emergency powers, or Congress, the people's representatives? The answer would shape the nation's future. The Supreme Court, acting as the final arbiter, delivered its verdict, a 7-2 ruling. The president's tariff was unconstitutional. Shock, relief, and anger rippled through the crowd. For some, it was a victory for checks and balances. For others, a betrayal of national security. The crisis was not over. If anything, a new chapter of uncertainty had just begun. The ruling closed one door, but opened another, more chaotic one. America braced for what would come next. The crisis began months earlier, when President Trump invoked emergency powers to impose a sweeping 15% tariff on nearly all imports. The move bypassed Congress and was justified as a way to protect American industries and national security. Supporters saw it as a bold correction to decades of flawed trade deals, willing to accept short-term pain for long-term gain. But the policy sent shockwaves through the global economy. International partners threatened retaliation, and economists warned of dire consequences for American consumers and businesses. Prices for everything from groceries to electronics soared. The tariff was universal, no distinction between allies or adversaries, critical components or luxury goods. Every container ship became a new front in an economic conflict. Businesses scrambled to absorb costs or pass them on to customers. The interconnected global economy was suddenly under threat. The tariff's reach was total, its disruption profound. It was not a targeted measure, but a blunt instrument. The stage was set for economic turmoil and a constitutional showdown. America was about to learn the true cost of a tariff for all. The nation's economic foundation trembled. The countdown to crisis had begun. The tariff's impact was immediate and personal. Families saw grocery bills and everyday expenses climb. Small businesses, already operating on thin margins, faced impossible choices. Media, small business owner looking stressed in empty shop, shopkeeper changing price tags, employee being let go, raise prices, cut staff, or risk closure. A coffee shop owner in Ohio watched her costs skyrocket. A contractor in Florida struggled to afford materials. American manufacturers relying on imported components were caught in the crossfire, making their products less competitive. Instead of helping, the tariff often hurt American industry. The pain rippled through supply chains, turning a tax on imports into a tax on American production. Frustration grew, town halls erupted in anger. Protests filled city streets as the tariff became a daily struggle for millions. The policy was no longer an abstract debate, it was a threat to livelihoods. The human cost mounted, fueling a groundswell of opposition. The nation's patience wore thin. The crisis was now a fight for survival. America's backbone, its families and small businesses, was on the brink. The president's unilateral action ignited a political firestorm. Congress, including members of the president's own party, was outraged. They argued the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to tax. The White House insisted the tariff was a matter of national security, not taxation. The debate became deeply partisan, with legal scholars and constitutional experts weighing in. Some saw the crisis as a wake-up call to reclaim legislative power. Others argued the president needed flexibility in emergencies. Bipartisan efforts to block the tariff stalled in gridlock. Businesses and investors watched, uncertain if the tariff would last a week or years. The political paralysis deepened the crisis. With Congress deadlocked, the courts became the last hope for resolution. The nation's constitutional balance hung in the balance. The stakes had never been higher. The battle lines were drawn. Lawsuits flooded federal courts almost immediately. Plaintiffs, from the Chamber of Commerce to state governments, argued the president had overstepped, imposing a tax without Congress. Their case rested on the Constitution's taxing and spending clause. The government countered that the tariff was a regulatory fee, not a tax, and within emergency powers, lower courts issued conflicting rulings, creating chaos and uncertainty. Businesses were left in limbo, unsure which rules applied. The legal battle exposed the limits of emergency powers and the dangers of executive overreach. Only the Supreme Court could provide a definitive answer. The nation waited as the highest court prepared to weigh in. The question was simple, but the consequences were enormous. Who truly holds the power to tax? The answer would define the future of American democracy. The stakes could not be higher. The Supreme Court took up the case with urgency. Justices pressed both sides. Could the president impose any tariff at any rate under emergency powers? The majority opinion, written by Chief Justice Roberts, was clear. The president cannot unilaterally impose a broad-based tax. The 15% tariff was, in effect, a tax, reserved for Congress alone. Emergencies do not create new powers, they test existing ones. The court dismantled the government's argument, ruling that emergency statutes cannot override the Constitution's specific limits. Allowing such power would erase a key check on the executive. The two dissenting justices warned against judicial overreach, but the majority held firm. Legal scholars hailed the decision as a landmark for separation of powers. The ruling reaffirmed Congress's control of the purse. The presidency retained emergency powers, but with clear limits. The constitutional balance was restored. The nation exhaled, but the fallout was just beginning. The Supreme Court's decision unleashed chaos. Importers, having paid billions in tariffs, were now owed refunds. The Treasury faced a massive liability, unprepared for the flood of claims. Businesses desperate for cash overwhelmed government systems. Delays created severe cash flow problems, threatening survival. Into the chaos stepped financial speculators, offering to buy refund claims at a discount. A new secondary market emerged, providing lifelines to some, but profits to others. The refund scramble became a symbol of the crisis's unintended consequences. Even in victory, the economic fallout created new winners and losers. The nation's relief was tempered by financial turmoil. The crisis had changed the rules of the game. America faced a new kind of uncertainty. In the aftermath, the nation began a slow recovery. Prices stabilized and businesses could plan again. Supply chains, though battered, started to heal. Congress, chastened, moved to reform emergency powers and clarify presidential limits. Bipartisan determination grew to restore checks and balances. Not all wounds healed, some businesses closed, some jobs lost forever. The refund crisis dragged on, with legal battles over payments. The debate over trade and economic security continued. The crisis forced the nation to confront these issues within a constitutional framework. Recovery was about more than economics. It was about restoring trust in institutions. Communities began to heal from political division. The system had been tested, but it held. The courts checked the executive. Congress began to reassert its authority. The resilience of American democracy was on display. The path forward was uncertain, but hope had returned. The 20,000 teen spoentilos, all 1.5 tariff crisis pushed American democracy to the brink. It showed how quickly executive action can disrupt lives and challenge constitutional order. The crisis exposed the dangers of unchecked emergency powers. The Supreme Court's ruling was a call for Congress to reclaim its role. The story was not just about leaders, but about the people, business owners, workers, and citizens who spoke out. Public engagement kept the debate alive and vital. As the nation healed, the episode became a lesson in the strength of democracy. The system of checks and balances had worked, even under pressure. The rule of law prevailed over any one office or individual. The crisis left scars, but also a renewed appreciation for constitutional guardrails. America emerged tested, but stronger. The lessons of the tariff crisis will shape the nation for years to come. From all of us here at CNN, I'm Anderson Cooper. Good night.